Hello and welcome to Commodity Champions. I'm Manisha Gupta. Today we focus on the king of fiber, which is cotton. Economic slowdown and aggressive rate hikes amidst recession fears have hit demand for textiles given its discretionary nature. This in turn has cotton millers needing less cotton, which in addition to prolonged lockdowns in China has created a demand issue. An ever-rising supply in the face of this waning demand has pushed prices to a one-year lows for this month. Moreover, the fears of continuing inflation in Europe and United Kingdom has the sector worried that the demand picture will remain muted. So what's in store for the sector going forward? Joining me now to take that discussion forward is William Bettendorf of the Cotton Council International, and Marc Lewkowitz is President and CEO of SUPIMA Cotton. Gentlemen, hi, thank you so much for joining us. William, what's your sense really on the global cotton trade right now? Because last year was a great one. We saw 11-year highs and all-time highs in case of cotton prices that actually got spilled over into this year as well. But now with this uncertainty, rising rate hikes and recession fears, how do you look at those numbers?
My sense of the global cotton trade is, that's a good question. You know, the cotton industry is always, I guess we follow the trends and we try to anticipate the trends, but this year with, I guess, the reduced reduction in some of the key producing countries, like the States, namely, because the U.S. is the largest global supplier of cotton, you know, to the global markets. You know, the situation's tight, you know, and with the recent floods in Pakistan, even though our government estimates are, I don't know if last month if they took that into consideration, but I think next month we'll see that the global supply is going to be reduced quite a bit. As a result, that will put pressure on prices. So, you know, obviously we'll have to see what happens at the end of the day, but generally I think there's a tightening in global supply which will help to put pressure on prices.
All right. Well, that's about supplies. And as you said, you could be looking at an impact on prices because of that. What's your sense on the demand picking up? Because that also seems to be slightly tepid. Do you see improvement in that coming too?
Yeah, demand, from what intelligence we've been able to gather from the textile mills in the major textile producing nations, the orders from the brands and retailers is reduced for the coming, say, 6 to 12 months. So you know, right now, this year, we're okay, but when you look at demand for the next year, it appears to be, from the intelligence that we've been able to collect, will be down quite a bit. It's not going to be a disaster by any means, but it will be lower. And so we've heard, again, from some of the mills and manufacturers that not only are they going to reduce their capacities, but actually in some cases, we've heard that some mills have boasted that they've actually shut down facilities because that means they're not actually losing money. So, you know, I think generally we're approaching a down cycle, but the good news is it's a cycle and it'll come back again.
Oh, well, yes. You know, William, shutting down capacities by millers is nothing. It's not just a global phenomena. We've seen pretty much that happen in the Indian markets as well, where SMEs and smaller mills actually have cut capacity. Some of them actually have shut shop as well in the southern part of India. But Marc, getting you in the conversation as well, give us a sense on the global cotton supply and demand. I mean, what numbers are you working with?
That's a difficult question to answer, Manisha. The issue with regards to global demand is really complicated through the COVID pandemic, through the war with Russia in Ukraine, energy issues. There's a lot of competition for land in terms of resources, not only for fiber production, but for food production, and even for energy production when you consider ethanol. The challenges in the marketplace also impact the cost of living, so consumers are currently challenged, and then the logistics issues on top of that. For India, the weather patterns certainly have been erratic, but it appears that despite the challenges this year in India, that you're going to have a big crop here in India, so that will be good for the domestic manufacturers, that they have a good, large domestic supply. But there's still a definitive need for imports of premium quality cotton for other demand characteristics for the marketplace, both, again, for the domestic consumption and for exports. So as we look at the current global cotton position, we can certainly see that globally cotton production will be down. The U.S. cotton production will only be estimated to be approximately 13 million bales this year on a positive note. That's down a few million bales from traditional numbers, and that is a challenge in itself. From the SUPIMA cotton side, we are near one of the record lows in terms of our production. The challenges with water availability and droughts around the world continue to impact SUPIMA cotton as well as some of the Texas cottons in America. We've seen climate challenges in Pakistan with the massive floods, unfortunately, and the disaster of the crop and the challenges there to the population, which are super unfortunate. And I think we're going to see more of that going to the future. We don't see any abatement of those challenges, and I think that's just going to continue to provide a little bit more volatility for our markets.
Well, yes, you rightly pointed out on the weather vagaries, and we have seen droughts and floods some places, and that has impacted the cotton crop across country and the world. William, but the important factor clearly is going to be China, because we've seen zero COVID policy there impact a lot of segments, sectors. China is also important when it comes to textiles and cotton. How do you see the Chinese factor playing out on this segment?
Yeah, China is always a wild card. The interesting thing with the United States is that China is it's our biggest importer of American cotton as well. And we source the majority of our apparel from China. So it's an interesting relationship between the United States and China. In terms of what's going to happen in the future, as you said, it's a wild card. We don't know. But hopefully through, I guess, continued discussion and communication, we'll be able to, to overcome things. And you had asked about, the COVID situation with their lockdown policy. It is incredibly strict, and that I think definitely has had an impact on manufacturing. But we're also hearing that the Chinese stocks are quite high. They buy cotton to fill their cotton reserve, but in terms of their textile production and exports, we're hearing that there's some product coming onto the market that's quite priced quite competitively. And so some of the global manufacturers are concerned about that, because we may have low-priced Chinese yarns or fabrics coming into the markets that traditionally hadn't been here before.
William, also, how do you see the space going forward then? How do you look at the prices? I mean, we've seen a very erratic year. This one, all-time highs to where we are trading right now is nearly 45 to 50% off from those kind of levels.
Manisha, that is a great question. How we see the future for the global industry, global textile industry, is mills and manufacturers are going to be under a lot of pressure from especially their customers, the brands and the retailers, because it's not just about supplying a shirt or a pair of jeans, because now the brands and the retailers are looking at a bigger picture, which also includes, are the products that they're supplying to the global consumers, are they made ethically? Are they made in a sustainable way? And this will be a deciding factor of who's going to be a winner and who's going to be a loser. Mills and manufacturers all around the world, not only are they beginning to receive this message from their customers, but they're beginning to, it's not really a request, it's more of a demand now. So it's a requirement. And in terms of the U.S. cotton industry, we feel we're perfectly poised to be able to meet that need, because we have a product that's sustainable and it's made in an ethical way. And even more importantly is that our supply chains are very transparent. So we are optimistic about the future. We're optimistic about our partners here in India, and we look forward to continuing to partner with them and be a partner for prosperity. And we're optimistic. What else can I say?
All right, we get that. Marc, same thing to you. What is your outlook for cotton going forward in fourth quarter and for the rest of 2023? Because the season is just about beginning. How are you guys playing it or calculating those numbers?
Hi, Manisha, and a pleasure to be here. Thank you for your question. And certainly an interesting question. Obviously, it's impossible to entirely predict price. And we're not adept to do so. It is one of the market considerations of the unknowns that we have to continuously deal with, including our supply chain. If you look at the current market conditions, there certainly continue to be lots of challenges with regards to supply, to inventory levels, to shipping constraints, etc. Now there's challenges with regards to increasing market prices across the entire spectrum, from the input materials that growers face to the manufacturing supply chains. So with the pressures in the marketplace, we probably see a bit of a softening. If you look at the US, the National Retail Federation is kind of forecasting the fourth quarter of the year to be down about 2%, but they're still forecasting consumption and total revenues to be up for the entire year, with the initial projections still forecast at a $4.8 trillion consumption for the US, which would be a new record. So despite all the challenges, the economy in the US has been exceptionally strong, and globally we continue to see challenges as well. So it is going to be a bit of a challenging finish to the year, but we see forecasts potentially into the new year possibly picking up a little bit, and hopefully a little bit more stabilization with regards to global challenges that we see currently.
Marc, also, what's your sense on the cotton prices trajectory? I mean, will we continue to see these volatile moves going forward too?
It's a really good question about prices, Manisha. So let's talk about it pragmatically. If we think about prices for a fiber, under the current situation of costs being up for everything, it's not only the costs that are up for the brands, the costs are up for the consumers, the costs are up for the manufacturers. That means energy costs are up, labor costs are up, operational costs are up, material costs, chemical costs, all of those costs are up. That applies to the fiber as well. It is almost impossible to envision that it's a fair assumption that somehow that cotton prices should be able to go lower, considering the input prices that are up for all the growers. The growers are at the end of the supply chain with the most amount of pressure of all pricing ending up in their laps. So we have to renegotiate that conversation and not necessarily only think about prices as a negative impact, but we have to be responsible to be able to support those growers so that they can be viable, that they can be sustainable, that they can continue to provide what we all as consumers ask for. So when it comes to prices, yes, it's a component of the supply chain. It's not reasonable to expect that somehow that the prices can substantially go lower from these levels, because there's no capability for the growers to absorb those decreases in value, because it'll leave them in a negative position where the costs exceed the cost of production.
Oh, very well said, Marc. Absolutely. This has been a year which has made it difficult for the mills as a raw material, and the way the prices have declined, it's a difficult time for the producers now. We will try and understand on what it really means for the Indian markets as well. William and Marc, thank you so much for joining us and giving us an international perspective for this. But after this break, we will talk about the Indian markets, on how they have really seen the impact of this. We will chat with Prabhu Damodaran. He's head of Texpreneurs Federation after this break.